You're tuned in to Women in America, the podcast that dives deep into the issues shaping gender equality in the U.S. and beyond. Hosted by Pari and Eve, public health professionals by day, content creators by passion, we bring you expert insights, compelling stories, and actionable strategies to push the fight for equality forward. This season, Rights at the Crossroads unpacks the intersections of reproductive rights and gender justice in today's America.
On this episode of Women in America, local Texas organizer Ricky Longoria joins us to discuss all things gerrymandering in Texas. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. Today I'm joined by Ricky Longoria, who I'm super excited for all of you to meet because not only is he just like such a sweet and charming soul, but also is like super well versed on all of the gerrymandering bullshit that is going on in Texas right now that I'm sure all of us are seeing on our socials. So, Ricky, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Pari, for uplifting Texas voices and Texas creators because it's an important time. All eyes need to be on Texas right now because Texas is at the forefront. You know, what's happening here in Texas, but who's to say that this is just the key figure for them to continue doing it in red states, to continue on so they don't ever have to worry about losing an election again. So thank you for having me. My name is Ricky Longoria, also known as the Gay Liberal. I use he, him pronouns, and I've been on the ground covering this since it started, since it happened. We knew that the special session that was going to be announced wasn't going to be surrounding flood and disaster relief. We knew it was going to be to gerrymander the state because Donald Trump gave Greg Abbott a call and Greg Abbott said, "What do you need me to do, Daddy?" And he did it. And they're trying to redistrict 5 congressional seats that's going to silence Black and brown voices. So right now, as we speak, Texas Democrats have broken quorum and are in places like New York and places like Illinois and are fighting and having a standoff with Greg Abbott to let him know that we're not going to let him steal our elections and silence the voices of minorities here in Texas.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a great high-level synopsis. And for those listening, we're going to deep dive into the many elements of this developing story as we go so that everyone's on the same page. Basically, for weeks now, the Texas Democrats have been trying to force Texas Republicans in the state legislature to discuss the very necessary relief efforts required for flood relief for survivors and just generally ensuring that there's infrastructure moving forward. And instead of doing any of those logical things, Texas Republicans have instead been focusing on redistricting. Redistricting, for those of you who are not familiar, also known as gerrymandering, is a term that is used to describe the redrawing of lines in a state that would essentially identify how people's votes are being counted. And what that means is that if your state is gerrymandered by a certain party, let's be real, almost always the Republicans, what that means is that they are drawing lines for voters in such a way that will make it impossible either for a Democrat to win or reduce that seat completely. So as an example, per the new map that Texas Republicans have drawn and proposed, Rep. Jasmine Crockett does not even live in her district anymore. She's still eligible to run, but it is a huge shift from what it used to be. And as Ricky mentioned, the key important piece here is that the way they've redrawn them now gets rid of 5 Democratic seats, which in a state like Texas is extremely hard to recover, right? So we are going to get into that about how they've been blocking flood relief efforts as a way of doing this. And to be honest, let's not all forget that this entire thing is only happening as a distraction from the Epstein files because they don't want to release those files. So yeah, Ricky, tell us about what you've been seeing on the ground in your organizing efforts and like in your door-to-door knocking. How are people reacting and responding to this?
Absolutely. And, you know, to piggyback off of what you said, this is an entire distraction from the Epstein files. If you didn't know, since Texas has been doing this, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was a key proponent enabling Jeffrey Epstein, was transferred to Texas at a low security prison that gives her basically way more freedoms than she should have. It should not have happened, but they don't want you to know that. So they're using this as a distraction. And Republicans, you know how they love to tie messaging and, you know, have such good propaganda. They're saying that Texas Democrats are fleeing the state and abandoning flood and disaster relief. No, Governor Greg Abbott has an opportunity right now to sign an executive order to get the flood and disaster relief out there, but he's not doing it. He's using this as a distraction, and he knows he's losing the war on messaging because people are coming to the sense and realization that, hey, Democrats didn't abandon people over here. They've been the ones pushing for it. And that's what I'm saying. I was in Arlington last Monday, and I saw hundreds of people show up. When I went, I drove 6.5 hours, and I was thinking to myself in the car, my gosh, I can only imagine, what if it's a flop? What if no one shows up? What if the Republicans get what they want? It was the complete opposite. I talked to so many different representatives. I talked to different voices, community organizers on the ground, and they all had one thing: let the voters have their maps. These maps don't belong to one party, don't belong to one politician, don't belong to one family who's, had this family political dynasty. It belongs to the people and the people who live in that district. And that was their message. I was talking with Representative Ramon Romero, and he was telling me that in his district, with the way the new map wants to get redrawn for the congressional person who's in that seat, they're not going to make sense. They're going to be in one community and they're going to represent someone who's about 5 cities across where they live. They have no connection to those people. It makes no sense. And when I've been talking to people here and educating them, they have no idea what gerrymandering is, and they have no idea what the redistricting process is or what it looks like. And I've been pushing that, hey, it does not need to happen until 2031, and it does not happen by a specific political party because of the bias that comes with it. And they've been super thankful for me for doing that. But when I was in Arlington, I got there at around 5 o'clock, drove 6.5 hours. I was there till about midnight because the Republicans on the ground in that hearing, they voted to end public comment. So people who waited hours to have their voice heard didn't get to have their voice heard because Republicans silenced them. They didn't want to hear them. So what did Democrats do? Texas House Democrats took the public comment and heard the people outside that auditorium at the University of Arlington. So people are showing up, and to everyone out there who says Texas is a red state, Texas is a non-voting state, those things are false. What this state is a gerrymandered state. And if this passes, it's going to become a further gerrymandered state, making it harder for every single Democrat to win an election statewide. But the people here are not going to back down. We're going to hold the line, and we're going to continue to hold Greg Abbott and Donald Trump accountable, because as Texans, you come for one of us, you come for all of us.
I've never heard that term before. Like, it's not a red state, it's a gerrymandered state. But when you said it, it like kind of made me like, ooh, like tingly. Like, okay, I feel a little bit of hope. I think to your point about how people not familiar with gerrymandering, you said that it doesn't need to happen until 2031. Give us a little bit of background on like why it would happen at all and why they're allowed to do what they're doing right now.
Yeah, so to my understanding, it happens every 10 years with the census. And once they get the census data, they look at that, they see what the demographics are and how they can best represent the people and, divide them into those congressional districts. I live in Congressional District 15. Before the midterms happened in 2022, I believe, it was a Democrat-held seat, but the congressional maps were redistricted. And I'm down here in the Rio Grande Valley near McAllen, and I'm right smack in the middle of McAllen and Corpus Christi. So I'm in a small town called Falfurrias. This district was held by Democrats for forever, up until 2022. Monica de la Cruz won, but she only won because of the district. If you look at our Texas 15 map the way it is right now, it looks like if a child got a Sharpie and just drew whatever they wanted, because we're all the way down here and our district goes up to parts of San Antonio. Like it's so weird. It makes no sense. We have no connection to those people up there in San Antonio. Those people up there don't have the same issues as the people down here. So it makes no sense. And that right there is an example of a gerrymandered state, because yes, I do get an opportunity to vote, but my vote's going to be canceled out by the new cities they have within that map that is heavily populated by Republicans.
Yeah, and I think that for reasonable people like yourself, it's easy to say that kind of a drawing doesn't make sense. But the truth is that to Republicans, it's very intentional, right? They have mapped out exactly what they need to do in order to make it so that it's basically impossible for a Democrat to win that state. And then they say, oh, well, Texas is a red state. Well, and you're now pointing out to all of us that actually it's just like you have organized it in such a way that means that we will never see the light of day in terms of true voting mattering, like true votes mattering.
Another example, that was Congressional District 15. I am in House District 31. That is being represented by Representative Ryan Guillen. He was a Democrat. I worked on his campaign. I volunteered for him up until the Republicans in Austin redistricted yet again and made Texas District 31 a red seat. So what did he do? He got bought by them, switched from Democrat to Republican, and now it's virtually impossible for a Democrat to win in this district because of the new cities they put into this map. That make absolutely no sense. Yet again, we're down here in South Texas and he's in places that has no business being in. It makes absolutely no sense. So they're gerrymandering every single part of this state because they know that their policies are unpopular. It turns out when you take away Medicaid, when you take away Medicare, when you take away food from hungry children, those policies are not popular. So it's going to make it harder for you to win an election. So they have to do anything they can, and that is cheating.
Absolutely. I mean, they know they can't win, and that's why they cheat. And like sometimes I look at Texas and the irony of like Greg Abbott being someone who has required medical care. He has required the use of DEI practices because he's in a wheelchair. Like this man is out here full on voting against himself in every single moment.
The real DEI hire.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And he's simultaneously in the middle of all of this announcing that Texas will no longer do DEI. I'm like, if Texas doesn't do DEI, how are you getting into a single building? Because all the accessibility ramps will be gone. Like Greg Abbott is truly like such an example of how people in the Republican Party don't understand, or I guess I shouldn't say understand, don't care that they vote against themselves, that everything they're doing is, everything they are is exempt from what their party stands for, because they believe that they will be the exception. They are somehow immune to any of this, right? And so I'm curious, like you've been on the ground and hearing from people, hearing from reps, but also just hearing from the everyday Texan. Have you been surprised by people's reactions to this whole situation?
I've been overwhelmingly surprised by the amount of reactions that I've gotten on social media. I was on the ground in Arlington. I've been making videos since the 2024 election. That's when I really came into action of being a content creator. And I was just posting random updates. Well, one video really took off. I got over 20,000 likes on that one video when I showcased how many angry Texans showed up, how many union leaders, how many organizers came to have their voices heard. And I got so many comments and DMs wanting to see how people can get involved, so much that someone, one of my followers, her name is Kate, sent us pizza to people who were there. So I've been overwhelmingly surprised, overwhelmingly filled with joy and grace. And I absolutely love it because it gives me hope. It gives me that recharge to fuel to get back in the fight, because people are counting on me. People who were not able to be on the ground, but I had the opportunity and the privilege to be there. It reassures me that, hey, I am doing something right. People are listening to me. And 20,000 people who were in Texas, on TikTok and across the country were supporting us. People in California, people in Illinois, New York. Every single person in that comment thread was positive, encouraging. It was good to see that people are finally realizing that Texas has an opportunity to be a winning state. They're finally taking an investment in us, because for far too long we've not been invested in. People have, looked over us and said, oh, they're not going to be able to win. Oh, it's a red state. It's going to be a Republican state. It's going to be that way until we change it. And finally, right now, Texas Democrats are showing the country that we've been fighting this fight for a long time. And that's the problem. Republicans like Greg Abbott have manipulated and fooled his base by saying that the Democrats here in Texas are the reason they can't afford groceries, or the reason they can't get health care. They're the reason that their kids can't play in a fair sport. No, Republicans have held this state for over 30 years. They are the reason why you can't afford your rent. They are the reason why you can't afford groceries. They are the reason the quote unquote the border crisis is happening here. They're the reason for that. So how am I going to blame a Democrat?
Yeah, I saw one of the Republican House reps tweet yesterday that it's time to take Texas back and make it great again. I was like, take it back from whom? Like,
Ooh.
You've been here the whole time.
Exactly.
Like, I laugh because I'm like, I know that when it comes to the messaging machine and the propaganda machine, like Republicans have unfortunately got that nailed. Like, I hate giving credit to them, but like that is one area where they tell, right?
I was talking about that yesterday. Like the Donald Trump's red hats, those became extremely popular in 2016, and they're still relevant and popular even now. It grinds my gears. Like, what are they doing that we are doing wrong?
Right. But I think what I sometimes ask myself, and maybe I just should stop asking myself logical questions, and that's the solution to this problem.
Yeah, no,
but
literally.
I was like, I'm sorry, if someone in Texas looks at that and is like, we're going to take Texas back, like truly just back from what? Back from whom? Like the entire time you guys have been talking about how Texas is a red state, it's the beacon of whatever. And
No
it's like,
California, like Texas.
yeah. So I'm like, how are you able to reconcile in your brain? Maybe there is no brain. That's the problem. But like, how are you able to reconcile that nonsense? And then speaking of reconciliation, you have a senator who literally dips out of your state and goes to vacation in Mexico every single time there's a freaking natural disaster. And somehow I've honestly started to feel like you need to use Ted Cruz's vacation schedule as a way of tracking when a natural disaster is going to come, because like that's the point we've reached. But like imagine being totally okay with that, but then vilifying Democrats for doing something completely legal and leaving their state to avoid having the gerrymandered maps passed, right? So it's just like, this is what I'm saying. The mental gymnasts are constant. And I want you, as the expert in this room about Texas, to really explain to the people all of these headlines we're seeing that are like so intentionally messaged, where they're saying like, Democrats are fleeing the states. Democrats are like running away. Democrats are getting on private jets. Explain to us, like as an actual intellectual, what it means the Democrats are doing this and what's the legal process that they're following to basically save Texas from this ridiculous gerrymandering.
Absolutely. And every single piece of messaging that Greg Abbott and these Texas Republicans do is intentional. And they're doing it in a way that they think that their base, their voters, they think that their voters are dumb. They think that they're stupid. They don't think they're paying attention. Because like you said, you have a Senator, Ted Cruz, who left the state to Cancun when we were freezing our asses off, and he left his dog. We have a Senator, Ted Cruz, who fled the state to Greece, was on a tourist trip while kids were drowning in Kerrville. How are you not going to call for his arrest? How are you not going to call him out on it? But you're going to call out Texas Democrats for literally saving democracy because you are planning to steal an election from 5 congressional seats. They talk a big game about 2020 and how Democrats rigged and stole the election. Let me tell you, if Democrats stole the election in 2020, why wouldn't we do it again in 2024?
I keep asking that. I'm like, also, we were in office, and now you're saying we somehow lost the election while we were in office. Like, there's just the cognitive dissonance is truly mind blowing.
It's astonishing. It is. And then, they say that Texans are fleeing Texas. What about the Republicans in Congress who voted to go on a break so they didn't have to release the Epstein files?
Yeah, I mean, they literally did that.
Yeah, so the Republicans in Congress, voted to have a break, come back home, get on a vacation, because they do not want to have any more votes pertaining to the Epstein files because they don't want them released. Now, we know their daddy, Donald Trump, was named in there multiple times per Attorney General Pam Bondi in May. She told him. So I don't know what they're trying to get at or what they're trying to look for, but I can finally feel and see that people are realizing that, oh my gosh, this administration lied to us. This administration is hiding something and it's deeper. And they don't want their base to see that. So they're using these headlines, they're using Texas as a ploy to distract you away from that.
Yeah.
And what Texas Democrats are doing is they've broken quorum. When you break a quorum, it means that you can't have a session or take a vote in the Texas House without meeting a certain quota of legislators being present. So they left to places like Illinois, and they left places like Boston, they left places like New York, and they went to those areas because if they're here, Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton will likely be able to arrest them and bring them back to Austin, to the Capitol, but that has no jurisdiction when you're out of state. So they left their families behind, they left their jobs behind and risk everything because they know the gravity of how serious this issue is. And I don't know if you know, but for those who are watching, Texas legislatures here make $7,000. That is not a livable wage because it's a part-time job. They usually have full-time jobs other than being a legislature. Like we have Senator Molly Cook. She is a nurse out of Houston and works 2 shifts just to make ends meet, all while fighting in Austin for our rights. So they went to these places to have a standoff and I guess to kind of negotiate with Greg Abbott and let him know that what he's doing is unconstitutional. Because why is he fast tracking this bill? Why is he fast tracking it in from one day to the next? Not a lick of disaster relief has been present. I think there was only 2 hearings about disaster relief that has happened. Why are they fast tracking this bill? Because they know they're going to lose in 2026. Now, Greg Abbott has called for the arrest, and Greg Abbott has said he's going to call for the expulsion of over 50 House Democrats. Now, in order for him to do that, he has to have a quorum. There's no quorum. So if there's no way Texas Democrats are going to come back to vote against them being expelled, he's doing it because he knows he has nothing else and he's trying to win the war on messaging to try and seem like a strong leader because Donald Trump's counting on him. He's up for re-election. And if he doesn't have Donald Trump's endorsement, he knows he's going to lose. So he's trying to get scrappy. He's trying to save his face and trying to show Donald Trump that he's doing everything in his power to save him and get those seats rigged and get those seats stolen from those 5 congressional districts.
This is such a funny catch-22 where it's like, oh, I want you to be here to vote on these gerrymandered maps, but the fact that you're not here is making me angry, and so I'm going to expel you. But in order to expel you, I need you to come back here so I can expel you. Like, so it's like, it's almost comical, like there are days where I want to put aside like my party lines and just be like, this country has gone mad. Like we've just lost it. Like there's no reasonability anymore, like truly just. And we are at a point now where somehow, despite the fact that it is so obvious what they're doing, that there's still so many people that are like aligning with them. It's just,
it makes no sense. It has become apparently obvious. One of these seats that they're aiming to redistrict is a vacant seat. That is House District 18. That is in the Houston area that's predominantly held, that, people who live there are predominantly Latinos and African Americans. That seat is vacant. Greg Abbott could have called a special election a long time ago, but he's not doing it. He called an election in November because he knows if he were to call an election right now, a Texas Democrat would win that seat, and that's going to give the Republicans in Congress an even slimmer majority. So that's why he's holding off on that election. So right now, people in Houston, Houstonians, are being taxed without being represented. That's taxation without representation. Let's go back to 8th grade and think about it and revisit that and learn that. That's unconstitutional. Because
Yeah.
how am I not being represented, but I'm taxing the government? Who's representing me? Who's being my voice in Congress?
Yeah.
Who's being my voice in Congress to take care of the issues that we have here, to address the Epstein files? No one. It's vacant because he knows a Democrat will win that seat. And that is a seat that they have intentionally redrawn. And if you look at those maps again, they're just squiggly lines in random places that make no sense. So it is become obvious. It's been obvious for a long time, but it's coming down to use this quorum as a tool. We're using it as a tool to talk to the everyday Texan and let them know that, hey, Republicans are silencing your voice, and they're doing it fast-tracked. And there was surveys. The majority of Texans do not want this to happen. The majority of Texans, you want to know what they want? Flood and disaster relief for the people in Central Texas and Kerrville. These policies that they have are so deeply unpopular, just like the school voucher scam that passed here in the state of Texas. The Texas Republican Party, when they had their convention, they had school vouchers listed as number 9. When the first session happened, Greg Abbott moved that from number 9 to number 1, moving every single priority that the Texas Republicans wanted all the way down. And Texas Republicans were even outspoken against that. Texas Republican representatives were outspoken against that. And if they were outspoken against that, they were primaried, and Greg Abbott, funded their opponents, put money into their opponents' campaigns, and they won simply for standing up for their constituents and standing up for Texas public schools and public school teachers. Because at the end of the day, Republicans do not care about you. They don't care about our children. They don't care about our teachers. They don't care about if you make a living wage, if you can get access to groceries. They're not pro-life. What they are doing, though, is they're manipulating every single Texan and every single person across this country into thinking the worst. Into, it's crazy. It's like they are playing mind games on them, and people are believing it, but some of them are waking up. And that's what we're using this quorum for, educating every single Texan about what's happening.
I think your point about how they play games even within their own party is such a good one, because I don't think people realize this. Like, the legacy media and, Donald Trump's approach to messaging has made it so that there's such a hard, you're either a Democrat or a Republican, and then everyone on those two sides thinks the same, which is absolutely just not true, right? Even within the Republican crowd, there's MAGA and then there's Republicans. I believe that Republicans have no representation anymore, period, because what ends up happening is exactly what you were describing, is that the MAGA machine, the MAGA machine is out here taking people who are even trying to be reasonable about how they're approaching social and political systems, and being if you don't fall in line with everything we align with, then you need to get out, right?
I've talked with Republicans on the ground here in Texas. I was doing voter ID, I was knocking on doors, and I encountered some Republicans, and I was talking to them about the big, beautiful bill. And I talked with this one individual who told me, he goes, my mother relies on these programs. She's disabled, she's on Social Security. We rely on things like Medicare. I didn't realize how much money was going to be taken away from those programs, and Republicans in Congress are fast tracking it while we're asleep here at 4 a.m. And that's what it's going to take. Talking to every single person, whether they're a Republican or they're a Democrat, putting aside partisan politics and just educating them on the fundamentals of what's happening, whether it be through social media, whether it be through knocking on doors in your community. So many people ask, what can I do? Go knock on the 2 doors down the street. Let them know what's happening. If you don't have social media, go talk to your 2 neighbors. Let them know what you're fighting for and why they should be fighting for it too. I was talking with my sister's boyfriend the other day, and we were having dinner, and we asked him if he was politically engaged, and his response was so heartfelt. He goes, I never really cared until Liana told me I should care. And it's because she was using her, relationship in her personal life, and that's what it's going to take. I have Republican family members who, saw what happened with the Epstein files, and they came forward and they said, I was lied to. My brother gave me his MAGA hat and said, do what you want with it. I don't want it anymore, because they're waking up and they're realizing that they've always been lied to. Why did Donald Trump promise to release the Epstein files? Then 6 months into his presidency, there's no files, but there's a list, and the list is made up. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
What is it?
Also, the fact that he was president already, he had access to those files back then too. And people don't ask themselves those questions because they've been bought into this machine of messaging. And I think that this is the core problem with where our country is right now, is whether it's Democrat or Republican. If you look at what is happening in Texas with Greg Abbott, where he's pushing out even Republicans who are trying to make sure that their own constituents' needs are actually represented, it makes me actually think of police systems, right? Because if you have an entire police force and there's 2 bad cops within this police force, but the other 98 cops don't report or ever fight back against those 2 bad cops, you have 100 bad cops. You have immediately taken your whole system and converted it so that it is no longer functional. And that is what is happening. And I have been curious, just from my own stance, but also uplifted about the fact that people are starting to see the light. Because because if we laid it all out like really clearly, let's start with Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. He knows he has been since the day that he met Jeffrey Epstein, right? He has just been lying about it. He had access to the files during his first presidency. During his campaign for his second presidency, he knew that he needed something big because like people were starting to feel the economic impacts and all of that stuff of the lack of his policies. You remember like during the election, all of these Republicans were like, well, I hate this tax plan. And it's like, this is Trump's tax plan. Actually, it's been in effect this entire time. And so he needed something big. So he made Epstein his entire thing. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, they all built their careers on this, right? Mm-hmm. They get to the presidency and then immediately are like, oh, well, the Epstein files, we need to release them. We need to release them. We need to release them. As if he doesn't know he's in them. And then Pam Bondi finds out he's in them. I mean, if she didn't know before that, she's quite dense, frankly, but finds out she's in them, tells him, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, no, the list doesn't exist, but the files are also made up, and also Obama created this whole thing, and this is Biden's fault somehow, and like, we don't even know what you're talking about, right? And I think that he genuinely expected that he would be able to tell his followers to just forget about it, and that they would, because he has done that before. But he centered his entire platform and the platform of multiple other people on this. So now what's happening is instead of talking about it anymore, he is putting pressure. He's put pressure on Congress, which is why Mike Johnson released the whole Congress and basically said, we're off until August, because they are hoping that by the time September rolls around, people have forgotten about this. This is why he's putting pressure on Texas. Like, people are literally losing their ability to vote, like their constitutional right, because he doesn't want to release the Epstein files. Like, that's what it is. And I'm glad that people are starting to make that connection, but I think that people like you and me, we need to continue to be super loud about the fact that, like, they don't give a fuck about Texas. They don't give a fuck about what happens to the people of Texas. They literally watch these little girls be taken away by floods and die and have not done a single damn thing. And not only have they not done a single damn thing, they don't want to do a single damn thing either.
Because it can happen again. They could do it right now. You don't need a session to get disaster relief. Greg Abbott can do it right now. Sign an executive order and get funds out to those people. But he's refusing to do that. Yes. He's refusing to do it because they don't care. They're not pro-life. If they were pro-life, that disaster declaration, executive order would have been done already. The session would have been called off, and the entire focus would be focused and centered around rebuilding places like Kerrville and Central Texas. But instead, they're trying to silence your voice, fast-tracking this bill that's going to take the voices of the minorities away from 5 congressional districts, and they're doing it all while you are being manipulated against, trying to get distracted. Because let me tell you, if you are sitting at home right now and you're watching, my voice doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter. If your vote and your voice didn't matter, why are they trying so hard to silence it?
And it's 5 congressional districts today. It could be 50 congressional districts tomorrow. And that's why we need to be stepping up and fighting back against this, right? And I'm so glad you brought up the fact that they don't actually need a session to do disaster relief, because people are forgetting about the fact that Donald Trump wants to get rid of FEMA, like the Federal Emergency Management Assistance Fund. He wants to get rid of that, and actually had decided to get rid of that. He was forced to bring it back because of the massive amount of public pressure, right? And this is what I'm trying to say, is that people have so much more power than they think. They have been, I think, like groomed to believe that they don't have the power, but they actually do. Like, public pressure matters, pushback matters, demanding things of your senators and House reps matters. And so I would love for you to close us out by telling us what the everyday Texan and the everyday American can be doing to fight back against this.
Pay attention. Pay attention to what's happening in your community, in your state, wherever if you're in a red state, pay attention closely to your state legislature, because we don't know who Donald Trump's calling. We don't know if he's calling other governors to try and redistrict those seats and take away the voices and the vote from you, the people. Pay attention. Uplift your political content creators, because we live in a political ecosystem where there's a lot of people who are not focused on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, but they get their information from TikTok. They get their information podcasts like this. And it's important that we are in these spaces because we're meeting people where they are, what they're listening to. And if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to pay attention to anything. We're not going to be able to get our focuses aligned. We're not going to win. We're going to let them take over. We're going to let their propaganda win. So pay attention to your creators, pay attention to your podcasts, pay attention to your state legislature, because come 2026, Republicans know they're going to lose. The big, beautiful bill, the majority of Americans didn't like. They passed it in the dead of night while everyone is asleep. And they think that they're basically the Americans weren't watching, but we were. So continue to have conversations with your family and your friends, educating them on what's happening. and that every single set of eyes in this country should be watching Texas and what Texas Democrats are doing, because we are fighting to stop this deal, not only in Texas, but stopping this deal nationwide from what Republicans and Donald Trump are trying to do. If you are in Texas, talk to your family and your friends about what they're doing. If you are in any of these congressional districts that they're trying to silence, specifically in the Houston area in Tarrant County, tell them they're silencing your voice. If you want to donate, go to stopthetexassteal.com. And for the love of God, uplift Texas content creators. We are on the ground fighting the fight day in and day out, trying to get you updates as fast as we can. We don't know how long this quorum break is going to be. We should have updates, within the coming days. But we are using every single tool in our toolbox to fight for the people. And please don't get distracted. Don't get discouraged by what Greg Abbott and Donald Trump and Ken Paxton are doing. Don't get distracted by those empty threats, because there's the Texas legislatures who are the Texas Democrats fighting back. They're attorneys. They know what to do. They know how to fight back. But it's $500 a day they're getting fined. So please send a $2 donation to stopthetexassteal.com. Let them know we have their back, because all eyes are on Texas and we have to keep the momentum going. We have to do this so Greg Abbott and Donald Trump can get the message loud and clear. We're not going to let them have power over our maps.
I think that is very critical thing for people to remember, is that Texas is often the testing ground for Republicans and what they think people are willing to put up with. And just because you might not live in Texas does not mean that this doesn't affect you, right? We are talking about it today, but tomorrow it could be a whole other state, exactly like
Ohio.
Yeah, you don't know which governors Donald Trump is on the phone with bullying. So we need to be taking a stand every time we see something happen the first time, because it cannot happen a second time anywhere. Like, that needs to be our approach. And so, Ricky, I super appreciate you for coming on and laying out the fact to people, and also just showing us, reminding us that the people on the ground are not the equivalent of the governors and the senators, right? Like, and everyday Texans are feeling very differently about this and are fighting back, and we need to be...
Just go to my pages, go look at the number of people that showed up, and you'll see that it doesn't make sense. This is a gerrymandered state.
Yeah, we need to be supporting them as much as possible. And speaking of Ricky's pages, he's available on Instagram at Gay Liberal. And is that your handle on all platforms as well?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at The Gay Liberal, and on TikTok, The Gay Liberal. So it's THEE Gay Liberal.
The Gay Liberal. Amazing. Ricky, thank you so much for being here, and continue to fight the good fight. We will also keep amplifying, and we'll stay tuned as this story develops.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Women in America. The redistricting of Texas continues to evolve, so stay tuned to our socials for the latest on that. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your network, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For additional resources, follow us on social media at women_in America. See you next week.